Have you ever looked at your life and thought, nothing is happening? You've prayed, you've worked, you've tried to be faithful, but the dream still hasn't moved. The prayer still hasn't been answered. The thing you planted still hasn't broken through the soil. And after a while, you begin to wonder whether anything is growing at all. I know that feeling. And strangely enough, God recently used a packet of seeds to help me understand it. Welcome to Wasting Time with Jesus, a place for ordinary people who want to know Jesus more deeply and recognize his presence in the middle of ordinary life. This spring, I bought a packet of seeds. I'm not an expert gardener. I was simply trying to follow the instructions, so I carefully read the back of the packet before planting them. And the directions told me to put the seeds in the freezer. Excuse me? I read it twice. The freezer? Surely that couldn't be right. Aren't seeds supposed to be protected from the cold? Aren't we supposed to keep them warm and put them in good soil and give them water and sunlight and encourage them to grow with beautiful talk of, life? Apparently not these seeds. These seeds needed winter before they could recognize spring. They had to experience the cold before they were ready to wake up. The freeze wasn't an obstacle to their growth. It was part of the process. And I sat there holding that tiny packet of seeds and laughing because suddenly my entire journey with writing and with Substack made perfect sense. When I began publishing my writing again, I imagined readers, lots of readers, if I'm being completely honest. I imagined conversations in community. I imagined people responding, sharing their stories, and encouraging one another. I imagined growth. What I got was silence. I would write an article, carefully edit it, choose an image, take a deep breath, and hit publish. And then I would wait and check the statistics and check them again. You know how this goes. You've been there. And maybe refresh the page one more time just in case something dramatic happened during the previous 30 seconds. Usually hadn't. The numbers barely moved, and it felt a little like standing in the middle of a snow-covered garden holding an empty packet of seeds and wondering why nothing was growing. I think most of us have experienced that feeling somewhere in our lives. We live in a world that expects a harvest every season. We're supposed to be continually growing, producing, succeeding, moving forward. And when life slows down, we assume something is wrong. When prayer goes unanswered, we wonder whether God's listening. When a dream stalls, we wonder whether we misunderstood our calling to begin with. When a relationship remains difficult, we question whether our prayers or efforts are making any difference. And when nothing appears to be happening, we start digging up the seeds to see whether they're working. I think we do this spiritually all the time. We ask God for direction, but then we panic when He doesn't answer according to our preferred schedule. We take one step of faith and spend the next several weeks questioning whether it was a mistake. We start something because we believe God asked us to do it, but when only a handful of people notice, we assume we must have heard Him incorrectly. We compare our winter to somebody else's summer and convince ourselves that we're falling behind. But a seed that's dug up every week never has the opportunity to grow. And some seeds need winter before they can grow at all. During those quiet months of writing, I thought I was waiting for God to grow an audience. What I didn't understand was that He was growing me. He was teaching me consistency instead of excitement, faithfulness instead of recognition, obedience instead of results. He was teaching me to write for one person instead of performing for a crowd. And most importantly, He was teaching me the difference between working for Jesus and simply spending time with Him. Those are not always the same thing. We can become so busy trying to accomplish something for God that we stop sitting with God. We can become so focused on building the ministry, growing the audience, serving the church, helping the family, or completing the assignment that we forget the relationship underneath all of it. Jesus did not ask me to produce numbers. He asked me to remain with Him. He asked me to be faithful with what He's placed in front of me. And that was a lesson I probably could not have learned through immediate success. I had to learn it through waiting. Winter often looks as though nothing is happening. The trees are bare, the ground is hard, the fields appear empty. But underneath the surface, things are changing. Roots are forming, the soil is shifting, seeds are preparing. Life is gathering itself in places we can't see yet. God does some of his most important work where no one can applaud it. Think about Noah waiting inside the ark, Joseph sitting in a prison, David hiding in the caves, Jesus alone in the wilderness. None of those seasons looked productive from the outside. None of them looked successful. There were no visible harvests. There was no cheering crowd celebrating their progress. And yet each of these seasons was preparing them for what came next. The waiting wasn't wasted. The isolation wasn't empty. The wilderness wasn't outside God's plan. Winter is not always punishment. Sometimes it protects, it preserves. Sometimes it strengthens, it prepares. Looking back, I can see seasons that I begged God to end. Seasons that felt frozen and lonely. Seasons where I wondered whether anything in my life was growing at all. At the time, I thought God had forgotten me. I thought I had been buried. I thought I got off track. What I couldn't see was that God wasn't burying me. He was preparing me. There's a difference between being buried and being planted. Both happen in the darkness. Both involve being covered by soil. Both can feel lonely and frightening. But burial assumes that the story is finished. Planting means the story has only begun. Just like those seeds in my freezer, some things within us may never awaken until they have passed through the winter. The freeze was not the end of the story, it's the beginning. Maybe you're starting at a frozen field today. Maybe it's a ministry that isn't growing, a prayer that hasn't been answered, a dream that seems stuck, a child you have prayed for again and again, a door that refuses to open. Or perhaps you don't even know what you're waiting for anymore. You simply know that this season has lasted longer than you expected. Before you decide that nothing is happening, remember this. Some seeds need winter. Some roots grow deepest in the cold. Some lessons can only be learned in waiting. And some of God's greatest work happens long before the first green shoot breaks through the soil. We often think joy belongs to the harvest. We tell ourselves we'll be joyful when the prayer is answered, when the opportunity arrives, when the ministry grows, and when the relationship changes, when spring finally comes. But joy is not reserved for the harvest. Joy is not something we manufacture through determination or positive thinking. Joy is the touch of the Holy Spirit in every moment, even winter, especially winter. Because sometimes the miracle isn't the fruit. Sometimes the miracle is discovering that Jesus never left the frozen field. He was there the entire time, waiting with you, sitting beside you, whispering in your ear, strengthening you, preparing you, growing something beautiful beneath the surface, something you can't see yet. So if you're in a winter season today, don't rush to escape it. Don't keep digging up the seeds. Don't assume silence means absence. Sit with Jesus. Tell him that you're tired. You're confused. Tell him that you're struggling to believe anything is changing. You don't have to pretend with him, but stay long enough to remember that his presence is not dependent upon visible progress. Not every season is meant for harvesting. Some seasons are meant for becoming the person who will be ready when the harvest arrives. And when spring comes, and it will, you may finally understand why winter was necessary. Until then, keep showing up, keep trusting, keep planting what God gives you to plant, and keep wasting time with Jesus. Thank you for spending this time with me. Before you leave, take a moment and ask yourself, where am I demanding a harvest when God may still be growing roots? You don't have to force an answer. Just sit with the question and sit with Jesus.